As I say, we're getting serious now. We've been talking about our backgrounds, and we're all from a similar area, so we're going to have to stop doing that now. Everyone's here. It's great to see everyone coming in, and back for today, where we're looking at building children as mathematical problem solvers. So that is a topic that is really kind of dear to me, a big focus. So really excited for today. And just first of all, when you're coming in, it'd be brilliant. No obligation for anyone to interact in any way, but it'd be great if in the chat you could just introduce yourself. And in the chat, if you could select all panelists and attendees, so everyone can see where everyone's coming in from and all that, that'd be brilliant, as opposed to just us panelists. But why don't you come in with, if you feel comfortable, your name, whereabouts you are in the country, and if you've been to any of the first sessions, did you have any takeaways from part 1 and part 2? Yeah, so that'd be great, and we can see them kind of flicking in, interacting as we go along. One of the reasons why I really like this forum, as opposed to like a podcast type forum, is the fact that you've got the chance to ask questions and we can interact with those questions. So we won't see the chat because it's likely to fire away really quickly, but if there's any things you want us to get to, please, if you put them in the Q&A, that would be really helpful. I'll look at that, and we'll try and cover those themes where we can as we go along. This is also great. I love having people from who've got different roles and experiences and backgrounds. We can have a nuanced conversation that I think on social media it's hard to do. So that's the kind of what we'll do. So again, I've invited these 3 wonderful people because I really respect them and everything they do and have to bring, and I've got no idea what they're going to say. So really looking forward to that. I think. And just kind of introducing the topic today. So problem solving and building children as problem solvers. I think that when I look at my career and how that's gone, I think it's one of the things that I and probably lots of people have found the most challenging thing to do, to teach, to do it really well. We know that problem solving comes with a heavy cognitive load. It can be difficult. How do children assimilate those experiences with their understanding of maths generally? I think that people would probably feel like there's kind of less clarity on how exactly problem solving is built, and I think it's a challenging thing to do. Now I'm really excited about this and particularly today, because this is a space that I want to be able to have a big impact in over time in problem solving and developing the pedagogy around it, and so really I guess I'm here as a learner absolutely today. So really looking forward to getting going. Anyway, it's great to see there's some people ticking in, so we're going to get straight in. So how about what we'll do is I will get a bit of background from all the 3 guests joining us today. So we've got Kate and Kate. So how about Kate Frood we'll start with. So Kate, you want to tell us a bit about your background?
Okay. Hi everybody. I'm actually 28 years. In London the whole time, and for the last 20 odd I've been head teacher. But I guess why I'm here today is that journey has always been shaped by becoming, a bit like the other Kate was saying, accidentally into maths, because I've got an English degree. And I choose to teach as a head teacher. So I've had this incredible luxury now for over 20 years, where all I've taught really is problem solving to year 5 and 6 in my school. And I've got better and better at it, I have to say. And I also think I was just very lucky that in my very first class as an NQT, where there were no computers and no curriculum and no photocopiers and all those things, I had Ruth Mertens as a parent in my class, and you might know that name. She's behind Hamilton and Abacus, and she sort of took me under her wing, and I owe her so much really, because she got me on the maths journey. And then along the way between headships, I was a numeracy consultant, anybody who remembers that era in maths. So, and I love it. I absolutely love teaching maths problem solving.
And it's great that, you know, within your, as I say, you've seen as a leader, but then also I know that I knew from speaking to you about how your passion still lies actually in working with children in the classroom.
Oh yes, best part of the job.
Absolutely, and that's the thing that I think it's always hard to get away from, isn't it? So that it's great to have you here. And can I just say, it's wonderful. We've already got questions posted in the Q&A, which we'll definitely get to. So as you come in, and again, everyone, if you keep signing in, say hi, who you are. And but feel free to keep loading those in as we go as well. And then Kate Mole, you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and how you got there and your maths involvement.
Of course. So I'm coming up to 20 years in primary education, which is, I can't believe that. And the typical route of a class teacher and then into senior leadership. But feel really fortunate with my job where I am today. So I work part-time. I've got young children, 4 days a week, 3.5 to 4 days a week, and I work partly for the maths hubs, so London South West. So I'm assistant maths hub lead there, and I'm responsible for the primary arm of the Teaching for Mastery programme. And then for the other part of my week, I work for a multi-academy trust of 41 schools, 31 of them are primary schools, 34 of them are primary schools, and I support school improvement in maths across the trust. So I feel really fortunate. I get to work with lots of different teachers, lots of different leaders. We're a trust that celebrates diversity, and we don't prescribe, so I work with lots of different curriculums and views around mathematics. And I think with the maths hub work, I get to be involved in cutting edge pedagogy and how things are moving forward. So I have completely immersed myself in maths, and get the goosebumps from seeing improvement in teaching. And I think developing teachers is the absolute backbone of school improvement. And I think when you develop teachers, which is what I love doing now, and then you see the impact on pupil learning, and you see these children get it, really truly understand it, it gives me goosebumps. So I feel really lucky to be in that situation.
I remember my head teacher saying to me, Gareth, it's a great feeling when things go well in your class, but it's an even better feeling when things go well in someone else's class, when you've had that involvement as well. And
yeah, it's wonderful to see teachers and children grow, and schools grow, and curriculums grow, and achieving vision in mathematics. I feel very privileged.
Yeah, fantastic. And last but not least, Mr. James Jones, give us a bit about, I've met James, worked with you a lot, and it's been a real privilege. So James, tell us a little bit about you, your background.
Okay, well, I've been teaching for 23 years. I've qualified as a high school PE teacher, ended up in primary, just love maths. Got seconded as a exceptional teacher. I don't know who the heck decided on that one. And so I did a bit of advising around North Wales on raising kind of literacy and numeracy stuff. And now I'm a deputy head at the moment, and I'm teaching year 1 and 2, and they are amazing.
And one of the things I think is infectious about you, James, is, again, it's actually the kind of enthusiasm that you have day to day in the classroom, seeing the best in the children that you work with as well.
Oh yeah, they're amazing. All the children I've taught, I've just been really lucky, I guess. They've just been absolutely brilliant, really quirky, really expressive, and they just come alive. It's just great. I love it. Yeah.
And it's been great seeing how you facilitate that as well. And how, the relationships you build, which I think is such a backbone of great teaching is within those relationships. So it's great to, as I say, really, really excited about today. Now, I should give us all a heads up, because I think one of the questions that's kind of been posted in the Q&A already, there's 3, and I've only looked at the first one, was around, it does link, I think it will link to the first question we asked, but I'll read this and I'll combine it with the first question, if nothing else, to give us a bit of heads up time. So what do the panel think about the concept of mathematical maturity, in that students should not be asked to solve problems with novel content, but solve problems with mathematical knowledge they are more comfortable with? And I think that's an interesting theme that we'll look at, that we'll draw out some of the things but I wonder if that might combine with the first thing that we were due to discuss as well, which is, how has your approach philosophy toward helping children to problem solve changed over the course of your career? So I don't know if I'm asking one or both of those questions there. Sorry, I might be confusing massively. Kate Frood, do you want to go first in terms of...
Yeah, that was a very well, I can't remember the name of the person who asked it. That's a really well put question. And it's one of the things that I wanted to say tonight, which is, so I've got onto both. I mean, the journey I've been on with problem solving, I feel I feel bad. I think Craig Barton's book, How I Wish I'd Taught Maths. I mean, you can see behind me, I have got hundreds of ideas books. And I think 25 years ago, I'd open a page. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, and I go in and I just give it out and say, here we go, off you go. And the high attainers would solve it. And I suppose looking back, probably the low attainers didn't, but they got, you know, piggybacked on another child. So I guess the journey I've been on, particularly influenced by mastery and all the NCETM work, I teach problem solving now so much better and properly, you know, small steps, modeling, you know, overlearning and repetition. I'm quite thematic. I'll stick with something like being systematic for a few weeks. But that question, which was so beautifully posed, one of the things that I would have said today was keep the numbers simple. So the focus is on the problem solving skills. So I can do literally a term where all we work with in year 6 is 0 to 9 digits. You know, take the digits 0 to 9. How many ways can I think it's a really important principle. If you're doing, why do problem solving with irregular fractions or something? That's one of my basic principles, that the knowledge is within their capabilities, and the focus is on the skills. Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point that kind of Neil cuts to immediately, and that
Thank you, Neil.
Point there of where's the challenge coming from. And not having the content knowledge. I think that was one of the mistakes that I made, is having challenge coming from too many directions. And you look back and you think, wow, you know, and like we said about the cognitive load in problem solving. Kate, can I come to other Kate? Can I come to?
Yeah, and I feel exactly the same, and it makes me cringe really at how I've approached it in the past. And I think now you have to think about where you're placing the problem solving task in a mathematical journey, and what the content knowledge is that you're going to pose, and actually using content knowledge from prior, you know, previous year groups. And I was speaking with a colleague the other day, and she was teaching in year 5, and she said, you know, I think we've lost opportunities for non-routine problem solving as we've adopted mastery curriculums, and we've kind of gone through this coherent mathematical journey. I'm not saying we go back to, you know, a problem solving Friday, but we've got to just build it in at the right place. And she said, I was teaching year 5, and it was we'd done brilliant with decimals, and then we brought in a problem with decimals. Well, they hadn't mastered that content yet. And she said, I adapted an enriched problem from year 2. If I'd stuck with the year 2 content, they would have been able to successfully solve the problem, because the cognitive load was on the content rather than the process of problem solving and teaching those skills. So you have to think very carefully about the content that you're basing the problem on, you know, the content domain and the domain knowledge, and what you want to achieve in the session. You teach them problem solving, because they're never going to learn the content stuff from problem solving. I think that was an era we got into a while ago, wasn't it? Like exploratory learning and expecting children to learn mathematics through problem solving. And they won't. They have to have the knowledge secured and mastered to then free up the working memory to focus on the problem solving process.
Very interesting. It's kind of thinking, what is it that we want to develop, and where is that challenge going to come from, which I think is really interesting. And James, let me come to you as well. So for your, because I know we've done a lot of work together at What's Dyke, and it's been brilliant to see. So how would you say your approach to problem solving has developed over time?
Yeah, so my experience in Wales was, you know, place value, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division for years, and problem solving was kind of, the worded questions we'll do, you know, we won't concentrate on that. Anyway, since coming to your training, really, it's gone from, I've done a lot of research into the growth mindset and the brain being elastic, and I realized along the way that it's not a test for them. It's something that they're learning to do. So we can't expect them to be brilliant straight away. And that's okay. And to use small numbers, to have props, you know, any kind of props, resources, and we get out of them what we want them to do, which is become thinkers and thinking different ways to do things and most efficient ways. So it's not about everyone getting the answer right and Only me top ones can do this problem solving, and there is, in my opinion, there is no top and middle and bottom. They're all learners. They've all got the capacity to improve. They've all got the capacity to think. And the research that I've done, even children with disabilities can be trained to be really good mathematicians.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on, Kate. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think, again, I've observed, because like Kate, we've been a teaching school and do lots of CPD with teachers and research stuff. On my travels, I see often that the problem solving or the reasoning tasks are the preserve of the fast finishers.
Yeah.
And I kind of always have the challenge of like, why have they finished fast? Everybody should be struggling a bit, sort of thing. Anyway, side issue. And I think all children need to develop the reasoning, because I think I'm right. I'm not an academic, but the biggest predictor of future mathematical success is the ability to reason, not your number fluency. We'll all have children in our classes who are like robotic with their recall, but they can't do anything with it. So we have to get all children, whatever their prior attainment level, to be reasoning and talking. So yeah, totally agree, James.
And what I'll do, Kate, is I actually know a research article that points that out. And just to make a comment on someone who's coming in the chat, there is the recording of this that will go out on a web page, which I'll create, and I'll put a link to some research that points to that. Kate, were you going to come in there?
Yeah, I think it's around getting the cognitive conditions right, isn't it? And I think, when we think of children, when they face a problem, they must have the domain knowledge, the content knowledge secured. They must have, factual fluency, for example, because that could be a barrier. They've got to have environmental conditions right and the culture within the classroom right, kind of valuing the process rather than the answer getting. And I think it was John Mason who talked about working on mathematics and working through mathematics. And if you've got a culture where you work on, then you value the process and valuing the self-explanation, the metacognitive strategies. Whereas if you've got this idea of working through to find a solution, to get to the end and to get to the goal, then maybe we don't value and have the environmental conditions right for children to feel safe and secure to attack the problem and to break it down into simpler steps. So I think there's, the domain knowledge, the kind of factual fluency that will influence how they, progress through, and then valuing the process, making that more important than the answer.
And I think it's interesting there in terms of understanding as the teacher which part of the process you are actually driving at children improving in, and that clarity being very clearly communicated as well. Now one of the comments that's coming through, and it kind of links to something that I thought it'd be a good discussion following on from what we've said, is a mistake that I used to do, definitely used to commit, was giving too many children too low a success rate early in their experience of problem solving, and that being an issue. And I think now I would look at layering challenge, but early, specifically needing to give children higher levels of success. And just what I wanted to put out is, and this comes again from one of the questions that come through, how do we ensure that all children have high enough success initially? We've touched on that to some extent already. Does anyone want to go any further in terms of how it is we ensure that children have a high enough degree of success, and/or what do we draw children's attention to?
I think it depends what you say success is, because what is success? Is it getting everything right? Is it, struggling? What is success? Success is they become a really good thinker, a problem solver, somebody who can talk through things, somebody who can see different possibilities. Success isn't getting every question right or getting an exam. If they can become those kind of people, then they will be successful in those kind of academic ways anyway, I think.
See, I would, the one thing that I think is transformational for children, picking up on something that Kate said, and I can think of a boy in my year 6 at the moment whose life is altered because of this, factual fluency. You can't think about what you don't know. And the sheer fact that he now is, he can do, on times table rock stars, he can do 113 in a minute. I can do 42. But he's suddenly, hey, I'm in the club. I'm in the maths club. And when we're doing a little warm up at the beginning and Miss Frood goes, so what are 6 times 0.7? I go 4.2. He's got that connections because he's got that bedrock of automaticity, and he can be part of the game. So I think I sometimes worry when I'm doing coaching young teachers, they think it's fluency or reasoning somehow. And I just think you can't think about what you do. And I think the greatest gift for kind of getting on the bus is having the maths knowledge. And then it's exactly what Gareth said, making sure that success comes very quickly and targeting questions that are within their success range. So they get that kind of little sort of like, I'm in this, I'm sticking with this lesson. If you go in too high and too hard, they're going to go, not bothered. So it is that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think something I've used with children, I've used it with adults actually, present a problem and they don't know the way in. So they can be quite a distance from where they currently are to getting on that path as a way in. And when you present that situation, and it was an example actually from a year 6 SATs paper, but the content knowledge was from years 2 and 3. So the maths wasn't that difficult, but just the way in was very, very hard because they were focused on the specific question and the goal. So this idea of removing the goals, I think it was a Craig Barton thing actually, goal-free problems, where you say to children, what could you tell me from looking at these? And it was 3 cylinders, you know, liquid in A, liquid in B, and empty in C, with different scales on them. Well, if you give them the opportunity to find something out from the problem that you're presenting, it builds their confidence, and then you can start bringing some kind of goals in around it. But for them to have to feel successful when they're presented with that kind of, oh, it's a problem, I think is enormous for their kind of self-esteem. And then you can start teaching them, you know, other access strategies, like how could you represent it to find out what's known and what's unknown and what we need to find out. And I think, yeah, building their confidence with early success, and that's a good way of doing it, is remove the goal but present the context and the information. And what could you tell me? What could we find out?
And even a step back from that, Kate, one of my best giveaways for young teachers is actually saying to the children, give me a silly suggestion for the answer. You know, say you've got a pyramid and you're adding the blocks, you know, give me a silly suggestion for what the top could be. Well, everybody can give a wrong answer, and you accept the child who goes a million, trillion, billion, or infinity. You say, yep, brilliant, well done, nice and silly. And suddenly they're all taking part. So that's always been very successful for me, you know, rather than what's the right answer, just give me the wrong answer, because in giving you a wrong answer, they have to have some sense of what the right answer might be in order to give you a wrong answer.
If you spent more than 5 minutes with me, you've probably seen me talk about like taking a question and making it numberless and exploring possible answers, or looking at a question and thinking, what can I hide for us to look at? Well, what information what may we be asked, or to come up with different possibilities. And again, I didn't want to go into make this into a training session of sharing those examples, but I think that is really interesting as a way of accessing as well. And James, I really like you. Can I just come to you on something specifically, which is I know Joe Bowler's talked about this, and it's kind of, you've referred to almost leveling the playing field in what we celebrate and how we draw up. And I can't remember the phrase that she used, and when you're talking, hopefully it'll come to me. But almost drawing attention to what some children bring, even if their success may look different. Can you speak to that and how you've done that, or just any other thoughts around that, James?
Yeah, just making it like you taught me, really, the numbers small, and so that it's accessible, and then all of a sudden it levels the playing field, because those, you know, bright ones, this is too easy for me, you know, the numbers are small, but they don't think as well as the other children, the slower learners, because they don't have to. Whereas the ones who are on that journey a little bit behind, they really think of new, different ways of finding it. And even now in year 1 and 2, the ones who other teachers might say, oh, low ability, I don't. That they are the best thinkers in the class, and they're just like, and they love learning because it's level playing field, small numbers. They love it. They love learning. They love seeing different ways, and kind of the high attainers, that they're worried because they're not first all of a sudden. They're not getting everything right first all of a sudden. They're not getting all of the attention.
And
I don't know
the phrase that Joe Bowler used, which you're an expert drawing out, James, is status differences, addressing status differences, that perceived status differences within children. And I think that has a real place as well. I think both Kates were trying to come in there. So do you want to, either of you?
Oh, endlessly. I love it. I wanted to pick up on something Kate said earlier, because if you say, how's my teaching changed? I make a massive song and dance, like you say, put the problem on, and all kind of go, and we do this here. Then I'll say, we've got to find there's two metaphors I would use. One is we've got to find an anchor. We've got to find something in this problem where we can just root and get started, something that's definite. And the other metaphor is the one of like the parcel with the sellotape that you can't get his finger on. And once you find that bit of sellotape, this unwraps, oh, now this unwraps, and this unwraps. And I do lots of modeling just about getting started. Like you said, Kate, accessing. I'm going like that because you're beneath me, sorry. You know, they just getting started is you need to help children get started. And it's just like you all model writing and vocab. Someone's put a question about, it's my lower attainers haven't got the vocab. Well, you model writing, model mathematical vocab, overuse it, repeat it endlessly.
And I think as teachers as well, and this is what children do, is they get sidetracked by the context, by the superficial surface structure of a question. I don't know if you remember, there was a question about cooking a chicken a few years ago in SAT, and I remember one child saying, I don't know how to cook a chicken, you know, and they really got sidetracked by that. So actually, you know, helping children to see through the superficial structure to the deep structure. What's the mathematics here? And once you can get to that, you know, and actually there are very few structures that children meet in primary school. You know, there are infinite problems and infinite contexts, but very, very few structures. So helping them to see that really can really be a way and build their confidence.
And this is something that I find really interesting, because I think that comes down to variation as well, and children experiencing, because again, let's come to mistakes that I made. It was teaching different kinds of problems, and then children can't assimilate what I did today, even if they had success in that lesson. Sometimes I'd often see at the end of the year, I think, where's that gone? And actually we're unable to assimilate what we've done with. So I wonder if we can talk around that idea of assimilating problem-solving experiences with my wider mathematical understanding and making those connections.
Again, I know you didn't ask us, we're not on this to kind of toot about your materials, but that's why I think your stuff is so brilliant, because, you know, what's the difference? So the next time they meet what's the difference, they get the structure. There's no kind of working memory overload about, what have we got to do? They know what to do, but the numbers are different. And I think that principle of doing the same structure again and again and again, you know, that's the assimilation, isn't it? Whereas I'm like you, 20 years ago, I thought every lesson had to be completely different, keep it lively, you know, whereas I find myself using very similar, certainly at the start of a lesson, very similar things to get that buy-in to the lesson, really.
Kate, do you want to?
Yeah, I think again, and supporting teachers and young, you know, early career teachers, subject knowledge helps. So helping children to see the deep structure of maths when they're presented, and kind of getting rid of the context bit. So you know, for example, a problem around 2 items and totaling them up and finding change from £10 is exactly the same structure as finding a missing angle in a triangle. You know, you're adding the 2 angles that you know, and you're taking away from the whole. So looking at what the maths is and the structure and how that's represented, and saying, oh look, goodness me, we've got a money context here, but here we've got a geometry context, but actually the maths is really similar. So varying contexts, you know, that can be really powerful to help them see, do you know what, it's not that hard, it's just
what's it like, we've done these before. Yeah,
that's it, what have we done before that's very similar? And then similarly, okay, keep the context the same, but maybe vary the structure. So what's different this time? The maths is different this time, to help them to differentiate between the superficial structure and the deeper structure.
And James, can I ask you this? And again, you might want to come back to this if you need a bit of time to think about it. But you've taken this leap, which I once had the fortune of making, from teaching 11-year-olds to 5-year-olds. So how have you seen the principles applying? And you of course have had a limited time with all the restrictions we've had. But how would you say the differences then with younger children in your experience?
The younger ones are just so ready, because they just, I don't know how to explain it, but they just love learning, and I just try and make them involved in it. So if they can't see it with the visual, I get them to act it out, or I'll just constantly thinking, right, how can I make this simple for them? How can I make this visual for them? And some of the stuff is pretty quirky, but by the end they get it, and it's like nice, and you can see kind of the joy, and it's like, yes. And I don't know, I just think I'm just obsessed with, right, you are going to get this, and I'm going to find a way for you to understand it.
Now, that is a really interesting thing. And what would be great is drawing on this idea of representations, but also the idea, and I'm reading at the moment Kieran Mackel's book. And what I think is really interesting, he talked about this, that an understood context, a context that has personal significance for a child, can create a form of representation in their mind, in their experience. And we can often talk about, and rightly, I guess, about different forms of visual representations. But I think that's really important as well. And I really appreciate you raising that, James, because that can be a meaningful representation to a child as well. And can I just encourage people as you're going along? Again, we won't read everything in the chat because we just won't be able to keep up with it. But keep firing in. I'm going to read everything in the chat afterwards. I'd love to kind of get all of your thoughts and comments as we're going along. And so just keep firing in there. And again, questions you want us to see, I'll try and keep up with them in the Q&A. Kate, Frood, did you want to come in there? I thought you were.
No.
Okay. Let me just go to something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm just going to go to because I'd given people, I knew we'd end up meandering, which is the best thing, but I'm just going to put the Education Endowment Foundation report from a few years ago about improving maths in key stages 2 and 3. The full document is there, just if anyone isn't familiar to people, and it makes these 8 recommendations on improving attainment in maths, and one of them was teaching pupils strategies for solving problems, which is of course very relevant for today. So what I'm going to do, again, I'll put that on the web page from the recording that goes out, and I'm looking for the chat. That's the Q&A, Gareth, so I will get there in the end, and I'm just going to put that link in the chat if anyone if it wants access to that. And one of the points it raises, which I wanted to ask people about, was so I want to explore the balance between exploration and direct teaching within problem solving. It talks about how do we that we need to be able to teach children to use and compare different approaches, and show them how to interrogate and use their existing knowledge to solve problems, which Kate Frood touched on, this idea of we need to connect with what children know to what we want them to be able to do. And that is such an important aspect of maths. So what I wanted to come to now is how do we do those things? So teach children to compare different approaches and use their existing knowledge to solve non-standard problems. And what I guess I should have done is define problem solving as a problem where there's a ill-defined methodology to get to an answer. So can I, Kate Frood, can I go first to you on that one? Or do you want me to come back to you?
No, I mean, I suppose that's kind of what we do. So I would pose a problem and I would model how I might start, and I would get them excited, and I'd give them those hooks and that way in, as Kate said. And then I think there's that part of the lesson where they then just go off and try. And I think my lessons have always been framed, they sit where they want, they sit with who they want. So there's a whole kind of different, there's masses of talk. And then I would punctuate that lesson endlessly with kind of plenaries going, oh, everybody stop. James has come up with something here. James says it can't be an odd number. James, do you want to tell everybody why it can't be an odd number? So I would kind of move around the room, listening and picking up what children are doing. And if there's disagreement, or I didn't do it like that, I'd say, well, what did you do then? And endlessly pick it up and gradually sort of, you know, hone the lesson to a kind of final plenary where we go through if anybody found a solution and how they did it, but all the way along valuing, you know, the different ways in that they found, and obviously keeping close to me the ones who need a little bit more support, you know.
There's two things that really resonate with me in terms of my experience here. One was, I think I spent a lot of time when children are working independently helping individuals rather than planning what aspects we need to feed in. And the second thing is that I might have inferred incorrectly, Kate, but you've got quite clear control over these are the aspects we want to draw out, and I'm going to let James speak, or I'm going to draw that out for James, or I'm going to let, but his input has got quite a specific remit, because you want to be.
Well, I suppose I've taught long enough to know that somebody will make a certain mistake, or somebody will make a certain assumption. So I think that maybe that's the horrid thing about experience, that you just can't speed up. I just know somebody will do that. So I can kind of find my way through the lesson. But what I don't want to do is stop and tell them. I want to kind of make the children the experts and stand on a chair. And, you know, my favourite thing of all is, now, Kate has just made the most fantastic mistake. Well done, Kate. That's fantastic. I wanted someone to make that mistake. And we all stop and we look at that misconception or error. So I think it's being a sort of team of solvers, I suppose, and sharing as we go.
And Kate, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think that's just so powerful, because going back to what I said before, you can feel the culture in Kate's classroom. So the process is valued, and Kate knows where she wants them to get to. She knows where we're going to go, but she's the kind of conductor of this orchestra. You know, she's orchestrating and working the room and being so explicit in that. Goodness, James, could you just explain what you've done there? She knows that she wants to pick up on this, be it a misconception or be it a really fantastic step or way that children have begun to solve it. So she's modelling that through her talk. She's getting the children to do it. She's awarding time to it, taking the small steps, knowing that she's going to take them on this path of where they're going to get to. But getting children there to value the process. I think I still come back to this idea of, you know, relationships and culture and this sector, because problem solving can feel really hard. But if you value that and you know where you're going, then you can shape that journey, you can orchestrate the room, and you can conduct to support children to work through.
I think there's an interesting thing there in terms of consistency, which, you know, you can with like you say, Kate, and this culture that you create, and some of that, and having some of these features that actually really permeate throughout the children's whole school journey. So it's not just when they're with Mrs. Frood.
And if I had a worry about, I'm assuming some of the people on this webinar are young, being born into this current generation of maths curriculum, is quite a delivery model. You know, I get anxious about the kind of, you know, the schemes and white rows and all these things that sort of deliver. And I think it's not. It's kind of got, the kids have got to feel really part of that, rather than just, I am an empty vessel, here comes teacher, fills me up, next page, next chapter, next course subject. And I think you've really got to kind of, you know, make it a mathematical journey, and absolutely to those key structures and things they need to do.
And there's one thing that is dear to me that I want to keep, because I've learned a lot about, obviously, the importance of direct teaching, but it's children having the feeling that they've done something unique.
Yes.
And even if that's the way that they've articulated that, or the way that they've explored this idea, or that they've found multiple possible solutions, but that there's a motivation in this uniqueness, rather than we're all going through this machine. And keeping hold of that within what we've learned about excellent pedagogy as well, I think is really important.
And in this period now after the pandemic, you know, this is our moment to reclaim teaching what we know needs to be taught and not just what the next page says. And there's some great stuff from NCTM actually about you know, working out what needs to be taught. But it says I've got to do next week. No, what do the children need to learn next? You know, and I think it's our moment to seize it back, really, and no SATs, you know.
Yeah. Now, can I ask two things? The first thing is, if I first can come to Kate about about the NCTM and some of the things that Kate has just referred to, and then James, perhaps you can talk about the direction with the new curriculum in Wales that we may end up going on, and because I think that you talk about exciting times, and I think that these are. So, Kate, first of all, did you want to come in there?
Yes, and Kate's talking about the curriculum prioritisation toolkit, which I was really fortunate to be part of a small group of teachers who worked on that. But it's based on the principle of, as you said, Kate, we have got an opportunity here. Let's teach children what they really need to know. And the number actually of Year 6 teachers who have said, oh my goodness, thank God for no SATs. Now I can teach them what they need. And I think if that's not indicative of a bit of a broken system, I don't know what is. But we've got this opportunity to think, where are they in their learning? And kind of, I'm going off on this tangent here from problem solving, but meaningfully and reliably understanding, assessing, not testing, assessing where they are, finding out and saying what's the next step in their journey, and teaching them the knowledge that they need to make the next step. And I think for teachers now, the best question they can kind of develop an answer to themselves is, what am I teaching? It's the same with problem solving. What am I teaching in the summer term, and why am I teaching it? You know, based on a really clear rationale around the core knowledge that children need in order to progress. So the work the NCTM has done on supporting schools with a toolkit for that, I think is brilliant, that we've got this opportunity to slow down, to speed up, to teach with depth, make sure they understand those core concepts, and then they will fly.
Absolutely, and I think that if we teach these, you know, the things that we know lead to long-term success, we haven't, and we were saying this last week, emphasising the idea that we haven't some deadline that by the end of this academic year, children have to be able to. We can think actually that in the long run, what are the things that will predict these children's long-term success? And we know their ability to read, problem solve, make connections in building understanding in one curriculum area. We're teaching children how to learn mathematics.
We are.
That is so
and I think the connections are really important. And I think that's where the DFE guidance is very powerful, the baking connections box. And I was talking to a teacher, you know, who was slightly worried that she hadn't taught using rulers in year 1, another one who was saying, oh, I haven't done measures in year 5 and I need to teach statistics. And I said, if we strip that back, if we think about what a ruler is, it's numbers in the linear number system. So if we teach that aspect of place value really well, number lines, ordinality, then actually that's a ruler, isn't it? And if we think about reading scales, you know, if you're looking at weight and mass, or capacity and volume, well, actually that's common divisions within the base 10 system. You know, 100, you know, a scale will either be in 2 parts or 4 parts or 5 parts. And statistics, again, it's intervals, isn't it, on a number line? So if we think about the connections, if we teach those core areas of maths really well, and this is where problem solving, you know, teaching children to make the connections and to assimilate their knowledge in different areas, then all of a sudden maths doesn't feel so hard. You know, if they can see those connections and boil it down to
and that was one of the questions that kind of came through, was about understanding these core structures and then how they then apply in different ways. And James, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you see, just maybe a brief overview about the new direction in the curriculum that was introduced just pre-pandemic, and how you see it manifesting for you at What Start? I know that you are a great visionary in terms of like this, the way you see children and looking long term. So do you want to talk a bit about your thoughts there?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, the Welsh government have gone around the world looking at best case scenarios, and basically they found out what everybody knows. Testing children doesn't work, you know, summative tests. So basically we're getting rid of all tests. We've got a progression, and we've got to come up with the assessments ourselves as teachers. So we assess, and part of the assessment is well-being. So are the children happy learners? Is their well-being good? Have they got good attitudes? And it's just bringing kind of the big ideas of subjects, the big ideas of science, the big ideas of maths, the concepts, rather than this is, it's more of, it's always been kind of how much can you cover? Whereas now it's not coverage, it's just personal progression. So this is where you started, and look at this progress you've made. It doesn't matter where you start. And this book here shows the kind of connections.
Joe Bowler, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which has been really useful, which you told me about, Gareth, ages ago, 2014. And it's kind of given us, there's no kind of time limit, even though I think leaders do want, data and summative data all the time. Until we can think of an assessment way of not getting summative and just getting formative and teaching, what they need to learn rather than what we're told to learn. I think it's very, very exciting.
That's great. And James, can you do me a favour? Just, I don't know if you can, in the chat, if you can just write down the title of that book. Is that possible? Because just a few people are asking, what's the title?
Oh, someone's done it. Suzanne White.
And if not, I'll put it in afterwards on the notes.
Someone's done it, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. There's a few things there that I think are really interesting, and one is the idea of how the whole accountability systems are still, I guess, line up with what's important for the children in the long run, and also teachers seeing the whole vista rather than just thinking this is today, this is what I'm teaching today.
Yeah.
I've seen the before, seeing the after, and how we might need to move between those, and seeing the kind of whole journey. Which
so my current obsession on that, Gareth, in year 6 is I want the children to understand that dividing by 10 is the same as finding a tenth, is the same as multiplying by 0.1, and is the same as, I've forgotten the fourth one, I've got to have a little grid out to, they're the same thing. So if it says 424 times 0.1, it's 10%. It's divided by 10. I want them to have that fluency and see the connection, because that opens so many doors when they see that. And the higher attainers see that, just see it. But the lower attainers need us to model it and then do all that kind of variation, that really build that success. And then it opens so many doors.
I think the NCT and PD materials are really good for that, Kate, aren't they? They teach structure and connections.
Yeah.
So there's, for example, there's a really brilliant segment on multiplying fractions by whole numbers and connecting that to finding a fraction of a quantity. And then linking that to division, known division facts as well. And I think seeing those connections, but the PD materials are really good for that.
We must talk about problem solving, Gareth. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, I've got 101 things I'm writing down to remember. Someone just said, Kieran's book, Thinking Deeply About Primary Mathematics, is what that's called. Now, one thing that I guess that I want to come to, which I think is an interesting one, because I think that problem solving is, like, I've reflected on how badly I taught it when I thought I taught it well. I remember my first ever job interview doing a problem solving lesson that I thought I'd nailed, and I look back but let's say we're supporting all teachers in school, particularly less experienced teachers. I think teaching problem solving effectively, where we're presenting problems coherently, is a really difficult thing logistically to do. And I guess one thing that I would just suggest is how we keep structures the same, and but the maths content changing. So one thing that I recommend is having, whatever they are, certain generic themes or headings, whether it's small difference questions or how many ways tasks, which children are consistently exposed to. So then they can focus on the maths that's embedded within that, within this context. Now, whatever that, or the approach is numberless prompts, but there being clarity from subject leaders within the school and support for staff on what this looks like in our context. So again, I'd love to get your thoughts on how that works for you in your context. and or this idea of, you know, really connecting what children already learn to these non-standard tasks. So anyone want to come in there on this kind of consistent approach, supporting particularly less experienced teachers?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to whole school systems, doesn't it, there? So I think, you know, maths leaders and school leaders have got to have, you know, a vision for problem solving. They've got to have consistency and continuity. And then I think it's around developing these teachers through effective PD. If you want these early career teachers to develop, you've got to develop them. You know, they're not going to pick up a book or a resource and be able to do it. So I think early career teachers, newly qualified teachers, you know, the most powerful thing you can do is go and watch another teacher, isn't it? You know, that you've got to see it. So and I think, again, coming back to culture in schools around removing or redefining when you observe somebody, it's about learning and developing, not about judgment. Because for too long, if somebody came into your classroom, they were there to kind of judge you and give you a grade. But seeing lessons and observing each other as a tool for learning, and co-planning with teachers. You know, okay, you've got this kind of approach, or you've got a fantastic resource, you know, let's use one of yours, Gareth. Somebody buys the Gareth Metcalf resources, well, not just so it's on the server, or here you go, but co-planning with them, designing lessons with them, team teaching with them, to get that consistency across the school, and developing teachers' confidence in teaching problem solving. I think, you know, unless we develop subject knowledge, mathematical subject knowledge, domain subject knowledge, teaching of problem solving through effective approaches of PD, then we're unlikely to get that kind of consistency whole school approach.
And can I come to Kate and then James in terms of how you
I mean, sorry, say that again.
Yeah, just how that's looked in your schools and how you've.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely we got very collaborative open door policy, and the teachers teach in 5 and 6. The teachers don't go away, stay in with me, and obviously I get run other classes too. I think it's interesting. Kate said earlier about the Friday problem solving lesson. I feel a bit defensive about that, because that's kind of what I do.
Oh,
but I always say to young teachers, and I think when I first started training, it was the kind of enrich, you know, do an enrich, this kind of standalone thing. What I now do, I think, is coach young teachers to bring reasoning into every lesson with those routines, with some of those Venn diagrams, whatever it is, some of the Gareth's lovely things, and get those questioning skills and get that in. So rather than have the kind of all, you know, bells and whistles enrich kind of thing on a Friday, which those of us with lots of experience can really, you know.
And I think that's what I was talking about,
yeah,
Kate.
Make every lesson a reasoning lesson, and have that moment in your lesson where the children are talking and suggesting and trying to solve something. And that's what I've done in terms of CPD that I've done with young teachers. And the other thing that is just so powerful, get them to do it themselves. If any of your maths lead staff meetings, watching particularly TAs on training, just laughing and giggling and being they won't stop working when you're trying to talk to them, because they're so enjoying it themselves. And then you stop and you say, better than a lesson on, you know, adding fractions, why? And really trying to get people to understand, why was that better? And what did you enjoy? What was so mathematically successful for you? Why were you enjoying the struggle? And you know, then once people realize what it's like to do problem solving, that they buy in at themselves and they want to improve, I guess.
And I think that's really interesting, because I think Problem Solving Friday touches on this idea of it's a very distinct thing with a very distinct pedagogy. And actually it's not that different.
No, it's not.
So finding 3 ways to calculate 16 multiplied by 9, you know. James, let me come to you, because one thing that I think that you do, that I see in that, and I'll just ask you, I might be answering my own question and just saying what you do very well, but it's actually the relationships that you build with staff. So you're creating a different atmosphere amongst the staff towards what it is to be a learner as a teacher. Yeah, that's what I feel. Now, do you want to talk a bit about that and your strengths in that way?
Yeah, I've made mistakes, obviously, but I just believe in staff as well, that we're learners, we're always learning, and not judge. We shouldn't be judging each other at all. You know, we should ask for help. So I've tried to eradicate competition. I've tried to give people kind of self-belief, and I've also shared with them resources. So, you know, like the G-Fletchy progression videos, so that they kind of get an understanding of early maths. And I took your idea from years ago and did flip learning. So I'd send videos home before the lesson so that they can watch the video and come in a bit prepared. Also involving parents, so through Seesaw, putting problem solving on Seesaw and saying, oh, you know, parents, can you work this out with your children? Like solve emojis and things like that. And just building up kind of that relationship between student, teacher, parents, just being in it together, just getting rid of competition and doing and introducing things quite gently. I didn't at the start, but quite gently. I'm getting better.
We're a people-loving species, sorry.
Yeah.
And just not assuming. Don't assume that they know, and don't assume that they don't know.
Yeah.
Same with the children. It's like, right, you know, let's go through this together.
Kate Frood, you're going.
No, I was going to say, you look at the weekend papers, there's pages of Ken, Sudoku, cross numbers, crosswords. You know, we are a species who loves problems and challenges. And I think that's that's the culture that we just need to find in the classroom, so that they don't have this split between they're loving the puzzles but then oh, it's a maths lesson. It's that same, you know, the playfulness really that you can have with numbers.
I'm delighted you say that, because it's the idea that we enjoy mental challenges.
You do, yeah.
And yeah, what I wanted to do before we finish, in a moment I'm going to come to you each, so I'll give you a moment because I've not given you a heads up for this, but just if you would have a thing you haven't said, or a final piece of advice, or something that you would say, or a place to look to, and so I'll come in with mine, then I'll give you a moment for yours. So one thing that I think has been important for me, because I always think with, like, I play a bit of golf. And I would say that, like, I'd always want a balance of playing and practicing. And I always think with teaching, you almost do a lot of playing, a lot where you're active, and not a lot of time being able to reflect or think or improve. And so for me, one thing that I decided that I was going to do is I was going to take at least 1 minute in every lesson just to stand there and watch what's happening without trying to have any involvement with anyone, and just feel what's happening and have that moment of actually thinking, this is going to help me to reflect. And sometimes just for myself, I felt like divorcing myself from the situation was helpful. Even if it means that there's 30 seconds where I'm not helping an individual on something. I felt like in the wider vista that helped me to reflect on my practice. So does anyone, how about, I always tend to go to Kate Frood or James because they're above or to my side, but Kate Mole to me is diagonally left. Do you want to kick off with anything that would be like a little takeaway that you'd give people? Yeah,
I think the big game changer for me was changing the culture of answer getting in my classroom. And I think and often I will give children answers. I say, I'm not bothered about the answer, you know, here's the answer. But then it changes what you value, and then it changes the focus on the process and valuing the self-explanation, even if the answer's wrong. And I think that has such a wide impact, because then you're valuing the reasoning, then you're valuing mistakes, because actually the answer's not important. Then children build their confidence, and it just changes everything in the classroom. And we're changing, I think, refocusing on what we really mean by understanding mathematics. You know, it's not just about the doing and the procedure and following some steps and getting an answer. And I think that culture in a classroom, for me, was a bit of a game changer over the past, I would say, 6 years. It has an impact on teachers, the culture, the classroom, across the school, on the pupils and their confidence. And ultimately what we want, you know, talked about what do we want to grow children to be confident and happy mathematicians. Yeah. You know? So that's what we want. And if we can think of different ways to do that, And when you think about in the past, we've had children who were quick calculators who raced through, and the definition of their prowess and their success was how many questions they got right. So changing that focus, I think, can have such an enormous impact.
Wonderful, thank you. And James, do you want to come in?
Something I learned from you is don't say yes, that's correct, or no, that's wrong. You always just say, oh, that's interesting. And then they have to explain, because you just don't tell them they've got it right or wrong, and they just look at you like, oh, did I get it right, did I get it wrong, I'm not sure, and they go back, oh. And just to get them to talk to other people, like, look, if you don't know what the answer is or how to do something, ask somebody else. If you've got a bad arm, you go to the doctor. If you've got bad breath, you go to your dentist. It's nothing embarrassing to ask somebody for help. There's nothing embarrassing about that at all.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, James. And Kate, Frood.
Yeah, just to say, the one thing I haven't managed to blow the horn for is that games. If I had to take one maths resource to a desert island, it'd be dice. And I think, even very little question, what do you need to roll? Can you win on your next go? They so want to win that they'll work out the answer to that question. And then you see a child who's not just rolling and adding, they're going, I need a 7, I need a 7. What do you need to roll then? I'm 5 and 2. And then it all comes into play. So I would say games, dice games, absolutely fantastic. And also your point about reflections, Gareth, at the end of all our maths lessons in my school, the kids write us a message. And by year 6, they're really quite sophisticated. I think I'm getting this. I'd like a bit more practice, but it really helped me today when you reminded us that they've got that sense of being part of the journey. And when I now look at their books, I can't go through their work without hearing their voice. I'm like, where's your message? I can't mark this work unless I know what you thought of today's lesson. So I think that's that's in terms of culture change, that's very powerful. And sometimes they say, I didn't understand today, and I will write, I'm really sorry I didn't get to you. I've made a note to help you next time. And they think, oh my God, that's so much better than just wrong, isn't it?
And that's something we were going to cover, which didn't monitor, reflect on, and communicate in problem solving. That's a brilliant way to finish. Now, I just want to I'm aware of everyone's time. So all I'm going to finish by saying is thank you so much. Well, first of all, for Kate and James, which has just been wonderful hearing all your views. And the next session we've got it's after the Easter holidays, when we're going to look at adapting school life post-lockdown. So again, some great people that are coming in and joining us there. So it'll be wonderful having as many people as possible. You'll get an email tomorrow from Zoom, which will give the link to the recording as well. So obviously, let me come out of that there. So I hope that's really useful. Thank you so much. I'll have a look through the chat as it goes on, but have a brilliant evening, and I'll call time there. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, my fellow Northwestians. Turns out, 2 being exiled in London, but
we have the 2 Kates, yes, at sea.
It was lovely to meet you.
Yeah, and you.
I'm gonna be checking you out now.
That means, has everybody else gone now, Gareth? No.
They're checking out slowly. No, actually, I have to say, it seems, and everyone is still here. It sounds terrible, but because I close, we don't get the chance to speak at the end, which is
I see. Oh, that's a shame.
To change.
I tell you, it really is that thing about just being with different people after a year of being with the set. I love them dearly. I love my staff, but I am overexcited.
Yes. And I love these sessions. I really enjoy it. Great stuff.
It's a really good format, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bye.